Coming up in our newscast tonight. North Korea delivers on the promise made during the Singapore summit. Caskets containing the remains of U.S. soldiers fallen during the Korean War are returned, but thousands more still remain undiscovered. Various events are held to mark the date when the pause button is pressed on the Korean War. This year's anniversary is especially meaningful as the two sides seek to put a permanent end to the tragedy that divided the nation in two. Troop reduction, mandatory service period shortened, structural modernization to improve efficiency and combat capabilities, all part of the government's defense reform plans. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. One of the agreements reached during the Singapore summit was repatriating the remains of American soldiers who never made it back from the Korean War. After some delays and uncertainties, it finally happened. Jiwon starts us out with the first of such instances in over a decade, which marks a significant step forward in building trust.
The remains of American soldiers killed on the northern side of the Korean peninsula during the Korean War have been returned after more than 60 years. A U.S. Air Force C-17 aircraft took off from Osan Air Base in South Korea early Friday morning, bound for Wonsan, North Korea, and returned at about 11 a.m. with the remains on board. The 55 caskets draped in UN flags were carried out of the plane and loaded onto vans by honor guards from UN Command. Though not a formal ceremony, some 1,000 service members, U.S. officials, and their families were at the site on Friday to honor and show respect to the fallen heroes. United States Forces Korea Commander General Vincent Brooks said that it was a successful mission following extensive coordination and that they will now prepare to honor the fallen before they're sent on their journey home. In the next 5 days or so, a team of American forensic specialists will do an in-depth examination of the remains, looking for any identification like dog tags or uniforms. An official repatriation ceremony will be held at the airbase on August 1st, just before the remains are flown to Hawaii for DNA identification, which will take months. With this, the number of soldiers whose remains have been recovered from the north since the 1990s will be closer to 700, up from the 635 already confirmed. White House released a statement saying that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has fulfilled part of the commitment he made to President Donald Trump, and that the U.S. is encouraged by Pyongyang's actions and the momentum for positive change. Washington also noted that the event represents a significant first step toward resuming both the repatriation of remains from North Korea and field operations to find the other 5,000 still there. President Trump also thanked the North Korean leader on Twitter, adding that after so many years, this will be a great moment for so many families. South Korea's foreign ministry also warmly welcomed the repatriation and evaluated it as a meaningful step in building trust between North Korea and the United States, and hoped that this would lead to work towards a settled peace on the Korean peninsula. The repatriation of remains is one of the points stipulated in the joint statement signed by Kim Jong-un and Trump in Singapore last month. That North Korea is following through on that promise has given hope to many that Pyongyang and Washington will progress also on denuclearization and a security guarantee. Jiwon, Arirang News.
Today marks the 65th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice Agreement. Now there are talks of formally declaring the end to that war. That's being discussed. Seoul would like to see it happen before this year is up. However, Pyongyang and Washington are still locking horns over what comes first, denuclearization or peace treaty. Oh Jung-hee has the full story.
The Korean War ended with an armistice agreement in 1953, and since then, Korea remains the only divided nation in the world. The people of the two Koreas live facing each other over a heavily militarized border. It's not a complete peace on the Korean peninsula, but a temporary ceasefire continuing for over 6 decades. 65 years have passed since the 1953 Armistice Agreement, and the two Koreas are moving to formally end that decades-long war. There was a previous attempt after the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit, but the latest attempt is stronger and is gaining much momentum as it was reaffirmed through the first ever North Korea-US summit, and the two Koreas have set a specific deadline of within this year. July 27th, the anniversary of the Armistice Agreement, was seen as the most plausible date. But the overall process slowed down as Pyongyang and Washington faced the question of what has to come first. Washington is cautious about declaring the end of the war as it may get rid of military options to pressure the North to denuclearize. But Pyongyang wants the declaration first as that gives the regime a security guarantee.
The US is concerned that North Korea may demand the withdrawal of US forces from South Korea, but North Korea won't ever accept a deal where it has to abandon all of its nukes first. Seoul should call on North Korea to come up with a detailed denuclearization schedule while speaking to the US about how they'll reward the regime throughout the process. And the declaration on ending the war should cover denuclearization as well to satisfy Washington.
Pundits add a war doesn't come to a formal end with a declaration only. It has to be stipulated in the peace treaty. The declaration itself does not have a legal binding power, but gives an assurance that the related parties will cooperate, which could accelerate North Korea's denuclearization.
The goals of denuclearization and a peace treaty are both too big to deal with. It's difficult to decide which has to be done first. The reason why the Panmunjom Declaration stipulated declaring an end to the Korean War within this year was to give North Korea an assurance as soon as possible that South Korea and the US are taking confidence-building measures on their part. North Korea needs a reason to denuclearize, and declaring an end to the war provides that reason.
Watchers point out that the two Koreas could first end an unusual decades-long armistice and then settle on technical issues through a peace treaty afterwards. The foreign ministers of the two Koreas, the US and possibly China, could discuss the matter when they attend the ASEAN Regional Forum in Singapore next week. 오정희, Arirang News.
A special ceremony to mark the 65th anniversary of the Korean Armistice Agreement was held at the truce village of Panmunjom today. The event was attended by some 200 guests, including Deputy Commander of the United Nations Command Lieutenant General Jaein, as well as senior officials from the UNC Military Armistice Commission, and the Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission. The Deputy Commander vowed to continue the UNC's mission of maintaining peace on the peninsula. When the Korean War broke out, UN member nations did not hesitate to send help. Seoul invited the selfless warriors from across the globe to give thanks and to honor them. Kan Young-woo takes us to the scene.
South Korea's Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs held a ceremony Friday morning to commemorate the United Nations troops who fought in the Korean War, as July 27th marks the 65th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice. To remember their sacrifices, the government invited 2,000 people, including UN veterans, foreign ambassadors, government officials, and South Korean citizens to the ceremony at Dongdaemun Design Plaza. After the 23 national flags and the UN flag were marched in, the event began with Korean national anthem and a moment of silence for the fallen heroes. Two foreign soldiers who defended South Korea were honored for their sacrifices in particular. From the Philippines, the late Conrado Diap, who died in the war, killed 120 enemy soldiers to win a key battle. His daughter accepted on his behalf the Taeguk Military Merit.
My father's death is not in vain because the way I look at Korea now, it has progressed so much. It is really amazing.
And Brian Perr, a veteran from the United Kingdom, was honored with the Order of Civil Merit. He contributed to establishing the Korean War Monument in London.
What I feel is that the way the South Korean people have developed this country and the capability of the senior diplomats, the senior soldiers, inevitably there will be a reunification sometime.
Shortly after the Korean War broke out in 1950, the UN Security Council called on its member states to defend South Korea. 16 countries sent military forces, and 6 other countries provided medical assistance. In total, almost 2 million people came to help. Although today's memorial ceremony lasted about an hour, the UN veterans and the sacrifices they made will always be remembered. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
Another round of general-level talks will be held between Seoul and Pyongyang at Panmunjom. South Korea's defense ministry made the announcement this morning, saying the North first suggested it. The meeting take place on Tuesday at the Peace House on the south side of the border village. Expected topics include ways to ease military tensions, as agreed in the Panmunjom Declaration. South Korea's side will be led by Major General Kim Do-gyun, while Lieutenant General Anik-san will lead the team from up north. The two military officials of the same rank reprise their roles from the latest such gathering. Gathered at the nation's top office today were top commanders of South Korea's entire armed forces. There, President Moon Jae-in laid out his vision for a strong military reform. Moon Geon-young shares with us his remarks.
The military must take its fate into its own hands and push forward with reform. Those are the firm words of South Korea's commander-in-chief as he chaired a meeting of the top commanders of the nation's entire armed forces at the presidential Blue House on Friday.
질적으로 강한 군대를 건설해야 합니다. 최근의 안보 환경은 재래식 전쟁은 물론 사이버, 테러, 국제 범죄에도 전방위적으로 대응해야 할 상황입니다.
The president also said his military must possess comprehensive defense capabilities that can deal with the existing confrontation between the two Koreas while countering threats from all sorts of unidentified sources at the same time as well. The issue of wartime operational control was also raised during the meeting.
우리 군의 독자적 방위력을 획기적으로 강화해 전시작전 통제권을 조기에 전환하고 한미 연합 방위 주도 능력을 확보해야 합니다.
Rooting out corruption in the military and the defense industry must also be front and center of the reform, stressed South Korea's commander-in-chief.
방위사업 비리 역시 국민을 배신한 중대한 이적 행위입니다. 군이 충성할 대상은 오직 국가와 국민이라는 점을 명심해 주기 바랍니다.
Moon Geon-young, Arirang News, The Blue House.
A long-awaited plan to make necessary changes to the nation's military is unveiled. It focuses on building a more versatile, efficient, and effective fighting force. Park Jiwon has more on Defense Reform 2.0.
The Moon administration's Defense Reform 2.0, a long-planned comprehensive scheme, aims to modernize the nation's defense structure to better counter the ever-evolving transnational and non-military threats and challenges.
We will pursue the Defense Reform 2.0 in order to establish new forces that go in line with the changing times. Our ultimate goal is to make a developed and democratic armed forces. The two pillars that will sustain this goal is the confirmation of civilian control over the forces and a balanced development of the three branches of the military.
The reform will touch on four main subjects, namely military structure, military management, organizational culture, and military acquisition sector. In regards to the reforms on military structure, South Korea will continue to pursue its three-axis defense system, the kill chain preemptive strike system, the Korean Air and Missile Defense or KAMD strategy, and the Korean Massive Punishment and Retaliation system. Based on the staunch three-axis system, the South Korean military is aiming to fully prepare for the transfer of wartime operational control from the U.S. in the near future. By 2022, the number of troops will be reduced from the current 620,000 active men and women to 500,000. Secondly, regarding military management, the ministry will shorten the duration of the nation's mandatory military service by 2 or 3 months. Enlistment in the Army, including the Marine Corps, will be shortened to 18 months from the current 21 months. Service in the Navy and Air Force will be reduced to 20 and 22 months respectively. The reform plan will also increase the number of women in the ranks and reduce the number of generals from the current 436 to 360 by 2022. As for the military's organizational culture, the Defense Ministry will introduce a series of measures to enhance the welfare of soldiers, such as increasing the troops' salaries and allowing the use of cell phones at military units. Lastly, the ministry says it will eradicate corruption in matters related to defense acquisition and increase global competitiveness of the military business sector. The reform is expected to cost around $240 billion over the next 5 years. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Song Yang-mu also vowed to strongly pursue reforms at the Embattled Defense Security Command, saying it is his responsibility to successfully carry out the military intel unit's reform. Park Jiwon, Arirang News.
A funeral for an iconic progressive politician who took his own life earlier this week was held today at the National Assembly. Thousands turned up, including lawmakers, family members, and supporters from different walks of life. Kim Mo-kyun reports.
A state funeral was held Friday morning at the National Assembly for the late lawmaker Roh Hoe-chan, the floor leader for the minor opposition Justice Party, who passed away on Monday. It was a parliamentary-level funeral with the entire legislature designated as members of the funeral party. The ceremony started with a silent tribute, followed by a reading out of Roh's life achievements. Eulogies were delivered by several people, including the current speaker Moon Hee-sang and two lawmakers with Roh's Justice Party, Lee Jung-mi and Shim Sang-jung.
You are a trailblazer and a symbol of the progressive politics. You felt the pain of the workers and rejoiced at victories for the socially underprivileged. Your work stops here, but the values and spirit that you embodied will steadfastly endure. We sincerely hope you rest in peace.
One of Roh's nephews also spoke to mourners on behalf of the late lawmaker's family. The funeral ended with the mourners, including justices from the Supreme Court and fellow lawmakers from all sides, lighting incense and laying flowers on the altar. The former floor leader passed away on Monday in an apparent suicide. Allegations have surfaced that he received illegal political funds from a power blogger nicknamed Drew King, who himself is accused of nefarious online political activity. Roh left behind a note explaining that he did accept the money, but claimed it was not in exchange for any special favors. The news was a shock in Korea, where Roh had a clean image and was regarded as an accomplished reformer. Thousands of people gathered today to pay tribute and express their grief for the huge loss in Korean politics. After the ceremony, Roh's ashes were taken to the Moran Park in Namyangju City, the resting place of some 160 other martyrs for justice and democracy. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Staying with the tremendous loss to Korean politics, our Kim Jong helped us remember how he lived by turning the spotlight on his career and legacy leading up to his passing.
Born in 1956, Roh Hoe-chan was an iconic figure in Korea's labor movement and in progressive politics. He was an activist for democracy as early as high school when he joined in protests against the authoritarian leader at the time, Park Chung-hee. Roh was even put on the wanted list during the 1980s for his involvement in the student movement for democratization and the labor movement. After college, he worked as a welder in Incheon and played a vital role in forming the Incheon Region Democratic Workers' Federation in 1987. He was imprisoned 2 years later for being part of the banned labor group and for violating the national security law. In the 2000s, he entered politics and played a leading role in establishing a progressive political party. He was elected to parliament for the first time in 2004, and at the time of his death was serving a third term and was floor leader of the Justice Party. Roh denied allegations that he had received any illegal funds, but in the suicide note he left behind, he admitted accepting the funds but said he gave no special favors in return. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Over in Laos, a dam co-constructed by a Korean company collapsed, leading to a disaster that took lives and left many more unaccounted for. Other than dispatching a team to help rescue and relief efforts, Seoul's government plans to offer $1 million worth of aid. Choi Si-young has the latest.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced on Friday that it will offer cash and basic necessities worth $1 million for the thousands displaced by the Laos dam collapse. The necessities include blankets and hygiene kits, and other civilian organizations, including the Korean Red Cross and NSK Engineering and Construction, will chip in additional relief goods. The ministry said it is also dispatching a medical team and their assistants. They will fly to the Southeast Asian country on a military aircraft and help with rescue missions, medical assistance, and preventing epidemics. South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa spoke on the phone with her counterpart in Laos, Salumsai Komasit, and offered her condolences to the victims. She said South Korea will exhaust all avenues to help those affected. The two ministers are scheduled to hold a bilateral summit next week on the sidelines of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
The Bank of Korea submitted a report to the National Assembly outlining key economic issues, both domestic and global. Jiwon zooms in on the data that lawmakers should refer to when deciding policies.
The Korean Central Bank has highlighted the trade dispute between Washington and Beijing, U.S. monetary policy, and Korea's domestic jobs market as the main concerns for the South Korean economy. In a report submitted at a parliamentary briefing on Friday, the Bank of Korea said the deepening trade dispute between the U.S. and China could harm the Korean economy. Amid the rising tensions between its two main trading partners, Korea's exports have already edged down by 0.1% in June, marking the second fall in exports in 20 months. The report also cites U.S. interest rates as one of the financial market variables. Last month, the Fed raised its benchmark fund rate to between 1.75% and 2%, and signaled it will raise rates twice more before the end of this year. Despite the interest rate increases having a limited effect on the Korean economy so far, the upcoming U.S. rate hikes are leading to calls that the Korean Central Bank should do the same and raise its 1.5% rate in August or November. The central bank also highlights the need for more measures to boost job creation. Between January and June, an average of 142,000 new jobs were added each month, the slowest growth since the 2008 global financial crisis. But the report does forecast some recovery in the automobile and shipbuilding industries next year. The BOK has recently lowered the country's annual growth rate for this year to 2.9%, down of 0.1% from the target 3%. Won-jong-hwan, Arirang News.
Instead of being cooped up indoors with the AC in full blast, some Koreans are heading out to enjoy their summer vacation. Ko-rin shows us how they are finding ways to enjoy time away from work and home while beating the heat.
The intense heat in South Korea is changing how some people are spending their summer vacation. Here at Gyeongpo Beach in Gangneung, Gangwon-do Province, people are huddling under big beach umbrellas to escape the blazing sun. But aside from a dip in the sea, where can you cool off? One of the most popular spots is Hwam Cave, located in Cheongseon, Gangwon-do Province. This place used to be a gold mine and was in operation from 1922 to 1945. Natural stalactites were found inside, and it was later developed for tourists. According to an employee, this summer has brought more visitors than last year because people like the cooler air. If you venture inside this cave, the mercury dips to a refreshing 11 degrees Celsius. It's almost 20 degrees cooler than the sizzling temperature outside in Cheongseon.
We heard that this cave is cool and refreshing, but I am actually cold right now. My kids even had to wear jackets.
It's both entertaining and educational for kids who can watch these little goblin characters explain the process of gold mining. Visitors can also learn about the mine's history, how Koreans were forced to work here during Japan's colonial rule. If it's too chilly in the cave, another option is Anbandegi village in Gangneung. It's a farm village located at an altitude of 1,100 meters. So you can not only feel the breeze, but also get an astonishing view of the endless cabbage fields.
Because this place is located at a high altitude, it's really cool here, especially in the shade.
And when the sun goes down, it's time for stargazing, which some people don't mind doing for hours.
I wanted to visit somewhere new rather than the well-known beaches. I came here to look at the beautiful stars and relieve my stress.
The heat in South Korea is likely to continue for a while, so for many holiday makers looking to cool off, it's time to think outside the box. Ko-rin, Arirang News, Gangneung.
Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the update you need. Michelle, the season's 12th typhoon, Jonghyuns, that's a North Korean name meaning skylark, and it's expected to take a radical turn, I heard.
That's right, Daniel. It's due to change direction and head northwest while it gradually weakens. Now, the typhoon is expected to reach the East Sea near Jeju Island by Monday, but until then, the nation is expected to be under heavy precipitation and strong showers starting tomorrow. Now, heat wave warnings along the East Coast have been downgraded to advisories now, but the western areas still have to endure hot conditions during the weekend. Now, the scorching weather continues tomorrow here in Korea, while Tokyo is now bracing for heavy rain brought by Typhoon Jonghyuns. And let's check the readings for tomorrow. So it begins the morning at 27 degrees Celsius and Gyeongju cooler at 25 degrees. The highs will reach up into the mid-30s with showers. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
These are the stories we've prepared for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for watching. Have an incredible weekend.